Welcome to Viewpoints. I'm Heather Isbron, and with me today is Andrew Velasquez, Director for Illinois Emergency Management and Homeland Security Advisor to the Governor. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you for having me, Heather.
It's so nice to have you here today with us, and I wanted to take a minute and talk about mutual aid networks. I know you've been working very hard on that. And could you tell us a little bit about what they are and how they started?
Absolutely. One of the core elements, if you will, of our preparedness strategy in Illinois is the mutual aid network. We're very proud of that network. It is a very robust network that has been recognized nationally. And for us, the idea of cooperative agreements began in the fall of 1989, and it began with the fire service. And subsequently, we then created a mutual aid network for law enforcement, and then thereafter, mutual aid network for the health services. And today, we have mutual aid services for mortuary personnel, as well as mutual aid for telecommunicators. And so it has really expanded, and it has been a tremendous benefit for us in the state of Illinois.
And so what does that look like in terms of having an event within Illinois?
Well, I think what it does first and foremost is it ensures an enhanced state of readiness for the state. It allows us to be self-sustaining. It allows communities to assist one another in times of crisis, and we facilitate the resource requests that come in from different communities for any one of these mutual aid services, whether it be fire services, law enforcement, healthcare, telecommunicators, mortuary, you name it, we can provide it. And we've experienced great success with our mutual aid networks, most recently with the flooding in June of 2008. It affected us in a very catastrophic way, and so we were able to deploy a number of mutual aid teams to go out and help with this flood fight, and it was very successful.
So can you give me an example of how this became successful? What were the ingredients that made this program go?
Well, I would say that the ability to deploy fire services personnel to jurisdictions that perhaps were overwhelmed from either a fire perspective or an EMS perspective really for us made this program very successful. I mean, there were numerous emergencies that fire mutual aid were activated for, and to this day we still utilize them for pre-planning as well as for actual events that do occur. And again, it's been very successful for us, and as I said before, it expanded then into the law enforcement sector, into the healthcare network, and so we oftentimes receive numerous requests for these types of mutual aid networks to assist jurisdictions with special events. As a case in point, in the Taste of Chicago event in Chicago, we will deploy medical response teams to assist the Chicago Fire Department and the Chicago Office of Emergency Management there. So great success with the program. It's been recognized nationally. The Fire Service Mutual Aid Program, MABUS, is now expanding nationally.
Oh, wow.
And its core base was Illinois. So you can
Great.
see that there's been a lot of great success there.
Right. And what advice would you give to folks in other jurisdictions who see that success and who know about it and who would like to implement it? What are the things that would impede the progress of it, and what advice would you give to overcome those?
Well, I think sometimes individuals in communities, the public safety folks in certain communities might think that these resources may not be available during times of crisis, and I think that risk is very low. We've been able to demonstrate that we can make resources available whenever they're needed. You know, resource requests that come in from local units of government as well as county emergency management agencies. When I talk about preparedness, I oftentimes like to talk about it in the context of the 3 C's, right? Communication, cooperation, and collaboration. And I think this model fits squarely into these 3 C's concept, if you will. And the ability for a state to be self-sustaining during times of crisis, because you can't always depend on the federal government to come and provide you with aid in a timely manner. And the reason for that, it could be a multi state event
Mm-hmm.
where resources might be strapped, federal resources, and so you have to position yourself in a way where you could be self-sustaining, where you could address whatever the emergency is that you have at hand, you can address that effectively until federal resources are made available. And so our position has been to ensure that we can have a self-sustaining state, okay, and always have an enhanced state, enhanced state of readiness, if you will, during times of crisis.
That sounds great. What kinds of things might impede or problems did you overcome while you were developing this program?
I think sometimes funding obviously is an issue,
Mm-hmm.
but we've been great stewards of our Homeland Security funding. A lot of these mutual aid networks have been funded through the use of Homeland Security funding. The only concern that we may have is if in the event that we might see a decrease in Homeland Security funding, that may potentially impact, our ability to continue having a robust mutual aid network. But we always try to do our very best to find creative ways to fund our programs because they're very, very important. They're very critical to the public safety of our state, and it's something that we will continue to strive to ensure that we can maximize to the fullest extent possible.
So when you talk about self-sustainment, you're talking about self-sustainment in the event of, regardless of whether it's a terrorist event or a natural disaster,
You're
or
exactly
even
right. And when we plan for all of those hazards that are germane to the state.
Mm-hmm.
I oftentimes talk about those hazards that affect us, and I always categorize them as the 2 T's and everything in between. So it's from tornadoes to terrorism and everything in between. And so when we talk about developing mutual aid networks, we talk about developing those types of networks that would be most suitable for addressing all of the hazards and threats that affect us in our state.
So say somebody in our audience is watching and they're thinking, wow, I'd like to implement this in my agency or my jurisdiction. I'd like to bring this to my boss to kind of think about implementing. Who would they get a hold of in Illinois to maybe get a prototype?
They can contact me at the Illinois Emergency Management Agency, area code 217-782-2700. They can contact my office. I will be more than happy to talk about our mutual aid network, more than happy to talk about best practices in terms of how we can help other jurisdictions get off the ground, if you will, to start their own mutual aid networks. And so I think it's something that is sorely needed across the country. I think we need to have more reliance on these types of networks because they truly do serve to position us in such a way where we can be ready to the best extent possible to address those hazards that might befall us. So,
Well, thank you so much for being with us today.
my pleasure. Thank you.